And what about for your work in other areas, sort of outside of property, like the scholarship you described? For that, would you answer the question differently in relation to that work?
I put that on a liking for logical puzzles again. That, the question whether it is rational to follow a rule, and if so, under what circumstances and why, is interesting to me. It might not be interesting to many people. And that's kind of what runs through a lot of writing.
I wanted to ask you a few questions about your approach to teaching. Could you describe, as it relates to your 1L teaching, could you describe your general approach?
Well, what it's resolved to, and I'm not sure this is particularly something I want to tell people to do, is having a very organized presentation, aided, because it's easier when you're aided by PowerPoint illustrations. But I like there is a lot of logic in property, particularly. I mean, even when you're doing property that ties into social issues, you also need to know the logic of how it got to the point where it was, and the logic of the difficulty of getting it to another point. So I have a method in which I write. My PowerPoint slides are all questions. I got a lot of stupid pictures too for entertainment, but they're questions. And then in class, I have answers to go with the questions. But I post on the first day of class a complete set of the PowerPoint presentations I'm going to give, so that I can give the students some guidance, their first-year students, on what they should look for when they read, particularly these cases written in antique language. Which one of those great large collection of words that they're going to read that don't seem to have a lot of syntax with them, just a sea of words, should they pull out and think about? And I try to give them this advanced set of questions to guide them through. And then we just go through it. And I get very different reactions from the students on those. Some have really done it, and they this is tough stuff, so they've rarely have they figured it all out, but they've thought through some sort of answer to it. And others just were kind of, either didn't read the advanced questions or just said, well, I think I'll wait until someone tells me what this is supposed to mean.
What kind of questions do you sort of like specific questions about cases, or broader conceptual questions? Or
they're usually mini hypotheticals.
I see.
And I'm not into too many broad conceptual questions in property. I'm into specific. What does this mean? What are these verbal formulas? What is a fee simple subject to condition subsequent? And so they are, A and B do this in these words. What is this interest? And then I have also, what do you think questions? If you're doing bona fide purchase, where is the fairness balance in this rule? Did they get it right? Did they have it wrong? What is the aim of the rule in balancing people's different equities on their side?
So on that, I guess I have two follow-ups. The first is, why do you ask those types of questions? And what are you asking students to draw on? What knowledge are you asking students to draw on to answer them?
I don't, the more different types of things they could draw on, the better. But I am mainly trying to teach them to assemble a reasoning process in which they try to get the rules straight, and then they try to see in cases in which there's a close call on the rule, where would they go to think about it. But that's also often in the materials. Consider when you have a bona fide purchaser an owner entrusts something to a dealer who deals in goods of that kind, and a bona fide purchaser walks into the store and buys it. There is an argument for each side. What's more convincing? Why? I suppose that draws on their own either experience or intuition of fairness, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, right. Or values, or I don't know. Right. Do you think it's important for the student to engage in that material, to engage with the material from that perspective, or is it? Are you more interested with, as you said, sort of their ability to analyze the
I want their ability to analyze, and their ability to, if they were, more practically, if they were arguing this in court, if they were explaining it to a client, I would want them to do both of those things on two levels. One is, what the doctrine says, and then the other is, if there's ambiguity in what outcome that doctrine leads to, what are the purposes behind the doctrine? And I suppose that's drawing on their own intuitions of what's fair and right in the world. But you have to ask them to be operating in a commercial world, not, the world of who their friends are. It's the world of commerce and how it works.
Do they ever end up sharing? Do they ever end up sharing in class? Do you invite students to share their answers to those questions about some fairness issues in class?
Well, as I say, it depends on the subject matter, but probably about half overall of my questions are, what should the answer be, and the other half are what is the answer.
Yeah. And
you can see that the questions there would be different. Some have answers and some don't, or some have arguments. I call them on them and hope that they will respond. Sometimes they just kind of futz around, and sometimes they try to respond.
Do you use any sort of traditional Socratic method, or what? How do your?
I guess you could call it that. I mean, in a way, my PowerPoint slides that I give them are Socratic, in the sense that, they're not Socratic progressions, but they're asking them to formulate an answer. But again, the subject matter changes, and it's maybe a different kind of answer from one category to another. One is logic. What can you make sense of what you read? And the other one is, have the courts got this right?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your students, who they are and how you typically get to know them. Professors sometimes talk about their students as being similar to or different from them. In what ways do you find the students to be similar to and then different from you?
Well, most of them have fairly like minds. They've made it pretty far into academia and have some interest in it. Some of them are going to be much more ambitious doers with it, and some aren't. But my students, the first year is a big class, and I